This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of The Edge. I'm your host, Amy Nelson, and I brought back Brandi, Jackola, and Heather Barker for a second installment of Themes in Discovery and Star Trek. Ladies, thank you so much for coming back on.
Oh, it's our pleasure, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. I was really happy with all the wonderful feedback that we got last time. It takes a lot to do podcasts like these, and having that support was just monumental. So thank you, everybody, and I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, last time we were on was The Edge 22, so 2 weeks ago. And what did you think of the feedback that we got? Was there anything that stood out to you, Brandi?
Oh, there were so many things. It's like, oh, I didn't mean to make people cry. I'm sorry. But just, I've had people reach out to me, and some have been private, which is great, about having the exact same experiences as a child and never feeling like they had been able to talk to somebody about it. And I'm just always like, you can talk to me anytime. It's never going to go further than me, and you know I'm going to understand. And I just really appreciate people having the bravery to come forward and say, yes, that's me too, and thank you for talking about it, because it enables other people and helps them realize, yes, you can talk about it. You should talk about it. It's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, and it is. And that's why, for me, that's why I am open and I talk, because I hope that it will encourage or inspire others to do the same when they're ready. For me, with my current situation, I was really happy to get a lot of really positive feedback from our male listeners. Having an all-women podcast, and especially one that's incredibly emotional. There are other situations in life where I've gotten negative feedback because of that.
Been there.
Yeah. And so I was apprehensive. Like, I know that what we're doing is a great thing. And whether anyone ever listened, I didn't care, because I enjoyed sitting down and talking with both of you. But getting that support from so many men was just wonderful for me. I've recently been wronged by a man that I loved, and it's just nice to know that there are other men out there that are supportive of women, and women talking about the experiences in their lives. So I appreciate that so much, but so much wonderful feedback. I mean, all of it I'm packing away in my heart, because it's helping me get through this time in my life. So just thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it was, I think, more than I ever expected. Not that I expected anything, but just more than I even dreamed. I mean, there were, listeners saying that they were tearing up on the job site and on the subway, and, was just so thankful and thanked us for our courage of speaking so raw and honest about these themes that show up in Star Trek. And, many of the listeners was like, yeah, this is what Star Trek means to me. And so I was really glad that we could connect. And yeah, there were people posting on the Babel conference and, private messages to all of us and to me and on Twitter. It just, very overwhelmed and grateful for all of the listeners that did reach out to us. So
Hear, hear.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every single comment was appreciated. Every single one.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, our last episode, we didn't get to cover all the themes. And we had, in preparation for this, we had some good brainstorming sessions and actually some suggestions from listeners. So we decided to do a second podcast to cover more of the themes that we see in Discovery and in Star Trek. And so what we're going to talk about today is diversity and IDIC, progression, and guilt and regret. So let's start first with diversity and IDIC. I think this is going to be a huge portion because Star Trek is definitely well known for having diversity and infinite diversities and infinite combinations. So I would like to start out and ask, how do you see diversity covered in Discovery, and how is it relevant in your life? Heather, let's start with you.
Okay, I'll try not to talk for an hour here. I think, first of all, that it's so interesting. The IDIC was created to sell merchandise. And I think everyone who's listening is familiar with what the IDIC symbol looks like, and it stands for infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So Roddenberry wanted something that would sell and make him some cash, and so they developed this for it. It has become something so much more than a necklace, I think pretty much everyone who loves Star Trek, I would like to think truly understands what infinite diversity and infinite combinations means. For me, I tend to believe that while it does suggest that we should, accept that everyone has the right to be who they are, it stops at things like hate speech and intolerance, because those don't fit into Star Trek, right? Roddenberry's visions, and air quotes here, because I think Roddenberry's vision is a lot more than 2 words can suggest. Star Trek. The people in Star Trek had progressed beyond hatred, beyond bigotry, beyond intolerance. So those things I just tend to emphasize are not part of what infinite diversity and infinite combinations means. It can extend simply to the racial diversity on the crew, the ethnic diversity on the ship. I think everyone knows, we started off with an incredibly diverse crew in the original series, and that was heralded throughout Star Trek and even now in Discovery. And it was one of the things that I recognized, like, before we knew what this was even going to be about, aside from, 10 years, was it 10 years before Kirk and Spock and McCoy? We knew that we were getting, our first female woman of color lead. We knew that we were getting other women of color. We knew that we were getting our first gay character, and then that turned into characters. And that's a monumental thing. And I think it's important to note, when talking about representation in Star Trek, that Star Trek has done a really good job of pushing boundaries, but not breaking the glass ceiling, so to speak. So we have things like the first interracial kiss between Kirk and Uhura. But that wasn't a kiss of free will, right? They were forced into that kiss. So in that way, it can kind of be explained away. Still very important. Like, it was still there. We still saw it. And I know we talked a little bit last time about that not technically being the first interracial kiss on television or whatnot. But it was there, and it definitely broke, pushed a boundary. And then we had in DS9 and Rejoined, we have Jadzia Dax and I think her name is Khan, the other Trill. So they were, we had technically like the first lesbian kiss, but in that circumstance, it was still technically like previously the Trill hosts were heterosexual. And there was a point made to explain that. So even though it looked, again, air quotes, looked like a lesbian kiss, It really, truly wasn't. So a lot of people haven't understood why it's so important to have like a gay character or gay characters in Star Trek, and why, Sulu being gay in Star Trek Beyond, that wasn't quite enough. That's a whole other thing. But it's because we haven't flat out had just gay characters in Star Trek. And this is a big thing for me, being a queer person. A lot of us, I'm a white female, so I can be like, oh yeah, of course I've seen characters like me in Star Trek. But when you dig deeper and you talk about the person as a whole and things like being gay, being queer, we haven't had that representation. Unfortunately, it came with a lot of pushback from people who I don't think truly understand what infinite diversity and infinite combinations means or implies. And I'm really sad to see that within the Star Trek community. I knew that this would never be something where it was, air quotes, shoved in your face or shoved down your throat or done in any way other than to just say, look, there are gay people in the world. Now they're in Star Trek. They did a phenomenal job with the characters. I think Stamets and Culber, man, their relationship is very real. They kind of play with each other. They antagonize a little bit, but you can tell from the little that we've seen of them together, like how much they love each other. And especially in the very last episode where Stamets was, doing what was it now? 132?
133. Yeah.
33. Like I'm losing it. I need to watch it again. Doing all those jumps, like the desperation, the fear that this might be the last, this might be the end of his life. This might be the last time that he sees Culber. The reality is that, queer people are just people. We're all people. And we're finally in Star Trek. And that is a monumental thing, for me. And that's where it resonates for me. I know that Brandi wanted to talk a little bit about the woman representation. So I'll hand it off to her, I think.
Yeah. Well, with Star Trek, of course, when I was a kid, I grew up with the original series in reruns. And I remember seeing that final episode that was the literal last episode of the original series. And it's about this angry woman who decides to do this weird thing that switches bodies with Kirk because she can't be a starship captain. And as a kid, even in the 70s, I'm like, what the what? What? What are you talking about? And so that really bothered me. And it still kind of bothers me a little bit that it took us until Voyager before we had a series that had a female captain all the time. Not just, Beverly Crusher taking over for the night shift and what have you. Yeah, great. You're in command, but you're still not the captain. And of course, of course, All Good Things and etc. It's okay. Yeah. We see her in the future and yes, she's been a captain. So that's all fine and good. But Voyager is the first time that we actually see a female captain. And it seems like TV sometimes has a little trouble catching up to what's going on in the actual world. Because in 2017, this shouldn't be the first time that we're seeing a gay couple on Star Trek. This isn't the first time we should see a woman of color as the lead. So the progression, yes, it's finally there, but it should have happened sooner, in my humble opinion. There are other people, I'm sure, who might disagree with me, but I see so much of myself in Michael, and I see so much of myself also in Tilly. If you actually combined the two of them, that would be me, basically. Don't know when to shut up. Say what's on my mind before thinking. Actually have a real problem with social interaction. There's so many things that is a combination of those two women. And it's the first time that I've really felt like, that's me. That's me. Because I've never seen a female character before in Star Trek that I related that closely to. And so it was immediately just like, oh, I love Michael so much. And that was just from the first episode. I was just like, no. And I still do. I will never regret loving her. So and there's so many females in Discovery, whether they are secondary characters or whether they're right out in front, like Tilly and like Michael, and, sadly, Captain, what was it? Landry.
Yeah.
I knew it was Land something. I remember.
Yeah. It's definitely a bummer. I know there has been some talk in, amongst women I know about the death of Michelle or Georgiou and Landry. And I'm terrified of Stamets. I was so afraid he was I was like, no, they're not going to kill him off. It's not going to happen. And then watching that last episode, I was like, oh my gosh, is this actually going to happen? I can't watch anymore. When you are a minority and you see these characters on screen for such a short amount of time, regardless of how it can be explained. And, Anthony Rapp actually came out and talked about Rekha Sharma's character, Commander Landry, and that originally that character was supposed to be male and was going to get killed off anyway. And so I appreciated that clarification. But at the same time, when it comes down to those of us watching, when we see ourselves, again, I'm white, so I'm not a woman of color, but for women of color, they see within 3-4 episodes, 2 women of color killed off. That's a difficult thing. And it's sad and it's kind of hurtful because you're really excited to finally see those characters and to see what they do, especially Georgiou, because we can all admit Landry was kind of, I don't think we were ever supposed to like her. But I was curious, I was like, what's going on with Lorca? What's the deal there? But anyway, it's still difficult for those people watching. And I think that it's important, not to dismiss those feelings because those are valid feelings that people have, just like in the gay community when we see gay characters and those are token characters that are killed off. And it's happened. And so that's why a lot of us are concerned and on edge with Stamets and Culber because these are the first, bona fide gay characters in Star Trek, and we don't want to see them killed off. So sorry to interrupt you about that. I just wanted to emphasize that because I know it's been talked about.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm basically building up to is this, because we have this group of so-called misfits that are on Discovery and they found this home together. And because of that, they are not misfits anymore. They all fit with each other. But it was, I don't know how long ago it was sometime this year, some conservative person posted a photo that they had taken on the subway and there was a drag queen, gorgeous drag queen on the subway. And sitting next to her was a Muslim woman in a hijab. And basically their caption was, "Is this the world you want?" And I said, yes, it is. I want to see everybody sitting together and just being peaceful. There is no reason why that can't happen. No reason. Doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are, what gender you are. It doesn't matter. We're all human. We're all the same under our skin. We all love. We all hope. We all dream. We all cry. Unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath. But those people are not, I'm not even going to go down that road. They're like the few people that don't feel regret because they have no conscience. So yeah, that's the world I want to see. And that's the kind of thing I'm seeing on Discovery. Yes, that's the world that I want to see. That's the world we should have. So yeah, please keep bringing the diversity and especially the representation of women, because even so, when you start counting the females on the ship, really, how many have we seen that are white? We've seen Kayla and we've seen Tilly. And that's it. And
that was, I forgot to mention the bridge crew.
Super
it's got
diverse.
3 women. It's got an African woman. It's got Kayla Detmer, who's got the implant, and she was on the Shenzhou. And then Ariam, who's an augmented human right? I forget. They've said she's human. They said she's alien. I think she's an augmented human is what was last confirmed. And then we have Lieutenant Rice, who is an Asian male, and then Captain McDreamy boat. I don't know who that guy is. His name's like Milton Richter, I think is actually his name. But everyone was just like, oh, he's the dreamboat guy on the bridge. I'm like, I think he's had one line so far.
I'm fine with calling him Captain McDreamy boat. Works for me.
Yeah, but there's representation even there. And I think that what you said, Brandi, was important that these are all others. And the thing with Discovery is that, we're not quite to the 24th century yet. Like we're not quite to the place that we envision and want to see ourselves, where we've gotten past the bigotry and everything. These characters are all coming together and all finding their place on the ship together. And I think that just, right there is such an excellent example of how a diverse culture can learn to work together. So yeah.
Yeah, they basically retconned the whole women can't be starship captains with JoJo. Yeah. And so they're just kind of sweeping it under the rug, and we don't want it mentioned ever again. So, and that's fine. But anyone that muddles through season 3 of Star Trek is eventually going to get that to that episode in the original series and go, wait a minute.
You can just skip that episode.
You really can, except I think that William Shatner actually did a really great job of being a woman. So, I was surprised actually. So, but yeah.
Well, one thing that I like that Discovery does, and probably more so than any other series, is that it just is. And they're not making a big statement about it and just seeing it as for what it is and not making a big deal of it. And I think, like, in my own personal life, like growing up in Utah, very homogenous, very the same, not a lot of diversity in the way that people think, in the way that people worship, in the color of their skin. Like, it is very, very white, pretty much same socioeconomic status, just sort of middle class to upper class. And so growing up, and I look at the transformation, and not saying that I'm the most accepting person in the world, but like I've had experiences starting from a very young age, surprisingly enough, in Salt Lake City, that has led me to accept and embrace diversity, which I find a little bit ironic to where I grew up. But my stepmother owned wig shops. And who needs wigs? Well, people with chemotherapy, people who are losing their hair, people who want to dress as women. So I was introduced to many transgendered and many people who just wanted to, who identified as women. And so there was a lovely couple, two guys. Well, and again, my terminology, please forgive me. There were two guys who were dressing up as women, and the one was a guy at his workplace, and then female at the home place. So, I'm this young person trying to figure this out, not ever seeing anything, but I just love them. They were so much fun when they'd come into the shop and we'd chit chat, and and I'm trying to learn as much as I can because I had never seen anything like this. But I think getting exposure to it is what's going to help you to become more accepting of it. And I think that some people are afraid of that exposure and afraid of accepting. And please don't be afraid of it, because that's what's going to lead everyone together. And when you can get that empathy for an individual, and then that will help you to take that and generalize it to the others, And I'm so grateful for my experiences at the wig shop and meeting all different walks of life there in Salt Lake City, Utah.
That really resonates with me. I was born in a small town in Kentucky. In fact, even to this day, my hometown is not forced segregation, but the Black community lives in one small area near some of my family. But I hate to say the term raised not to see color, because we need to see people. That's not a phrase that we should be using. I was raised to accept everyone. So it was really just, our town was mostly white. And then we had a handful of black kids in school with us. So I was taught to be friends with everyone. But then when I turned 9, my mom and stepdad got married and moved me to South Florida, which is like extremely diverse, all kinds of ethnicities. And it was a culture shock. I adjusted very quickly. My best friend, one of my first friends that I met, is Lebanese. And so I'm close with her family. And I'm so grateful that I was also exposed at a young age to just a wide variety of people, because that never played into my adult life of being like, oh, I don't know who you are, or, oh, where do you come? Like, it was all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, all kinds of religions. So I sometimes wonder, like, who would I be if I had stayed in Kentucky? And not to say that like everyone in my hometown is racist or small-minded or anything, because they're not. But it's true, when you don't have that exposure, people do become afraid or wary, or they just don't understand. Like you're conditioned. You're conditioned a certain way, similar with politics, right? And we don't want to go big into politics, but if you're raised, you're raised on one side of the spectrum, you may either fall in line with those ideals as you grow up, or you may start to challenge them and go a totally different way. But it's just that conditioning of how you're raised, that trickles down. And so I just extremely grateful to also have that similar experience, because I wouldn't want to be a different person. Like, I wouldn't want to be a person who's afraid of other people. So yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, well, what you said there sort of resonates. When I moved out of Salt Lake, and my first move outside of the state was to Houston, Texas. And oh boy, as a teacher, I mean, I was just used to teaching white kids. And I moved to Houston, and I swear, that is the melting pot of America. There was every single country, I swear, represented in Houston. And I was so happy to get to know these kids and their families. And that's one thing that I miss about Houston. I'm here in Las Vegas now, and there's diversity here. But I'm telling you, every type of Asian, every type of Middle Eastern, there were Europeans and South Americans and Mexicans and blacks and whites. And for the first time, the white population was a minority. And I had never experienced that coming from Utah.
And that's where we're headed, right? I mean,
yes,
that is the trend, and that's going to happen. So it's kind of a wake-up call. Like, if you're a person who hasn't had a lot of interaction with those different from you, it's time to start. And again, like, we're all just people. There are good people in the world. There are bad people in the world. We're just human beings. I know far more good people, especially within the Star Trek community, and I'll talk about that later. I would hope that everyone, wants to expand their world and expand their understanding and acceptance. And there's just no reason to stick with these preconceived notions of people that you're judging, but you've never met or talked to. I know that change can be difficult, and it can be hard to, initiate a conversation. But those are things that if you can push yourself to do them, they're only going to make your life better. So I'm a big proponent of giving other people a chance.
and being open to those new experiences. I think you're exactly right. I mean, because when you're in a homogeneous, then, I can relate to them very easily because there's so many things that we have in common, culture, skin color, whatever. So to push yourself and to allow yourself to try and ask those questions to build the commonalities, like that's how you're going to overcome and be more accepting and accept this diversity that we live in.
Yeah, like that's how we're going to get to Star Trek's, utopia. Whether a true utopia is likely, I don't think so. But I want to live in a world where people can just be people. Given no hate, no hate acts, hate speech, murder, all the bad stuff. But that, people can learn and grow and be accepted for who they are and, not treated poorly because of what they look like or their sexual orientation. And even, political nature. I've got friends and clients who have different political beliefs than I do. And sometimes it's hard. But at the end of the day, like I've known these people for years and I know that they're good people. So I'm not going to just, turn my head and turn those people away from my life because they think a little differently than I do. And right now, I think the world is struggling with a lot of that, not just in America, but, across the world. And, again, like you've got to be open-minded and you've got to push your own boundaries and try, because that's the only way that we're going to get to a place where we don't have war and senseless murder. And I want to live in that world.
Yeah, I do want to just point out one last thing. I know we're talking a lot about this, but I think that the youth and the future generations are leaps and bounds ahead of us. They are very much more accepting. There's definitely those that aren't, and still there's bullying and what have you, as we talked about last time. But at my school and at schools across the nation, there are clubs, and at my school, it's the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance Club. And one of the math teachers at my school is over this club, and he invited me to come and talk to his club. Well, he invited a bunch of other teachers. It wasn't just me, but and just basically to introduce myself and say, this is who I am. And I use the pronouns she and her, and, talk a little bit and then say my classroom, if ever you need to talk, is a safe place and you can tell me anything. And so I went there, it was last Friday, and talked to this club. I didn't even know who was there. And I looked and I'm like, I know these kids, they're my students, I didn't know they were in the GSA, and I didn't, if they were gay, they were straight, it didn't matter to me. They were there supporting each other. And the president of the club, she loves Star Trek. And so she's come, and she's never been my student, but because I have my whole Star Trek collection in my classroom, she's come up to me at the beginning of the year and, did you go to the convention? She actually went to the convention. And so we have these talks, every now and then. And so she's the president there. And so I went into IDIC and was telling them, well, as a math teacher, I always loved the word infinite. So infinite diversities and infinite combinations and what that meant. And that philosophy on how I really do take that to heart and believe it fully. And, and then just told the kids that my room was a safe place. And the kids were just so open and welcoming and, just so supportive of each other. I think, man, they are ahead of us. And I think we're on the right path as far as that goes.
Gives me hope. I mean, I didn't have anything like that in high school.
No, you would not even discuss.
No, I mean, I'm 36, so I graduated in 99. So, I don't want to think about that. But, there were gay students. I, at the time, was not really quite sure of my sexuality. so I didn't identify as one of them, but I had friends who were gay, bisexual, all spectrums. That's what, we're all finding that stuff out, especially like in high school and whatnot. But, kids know, like when some kids, when I didn't know my sexual orientation until I was older, but sometimes, when you're young, and it's hard to find a place to come out and talk about it and learn to understand it, because there's still a lot to process because you're different and you wonder why you're different. And it's scary. And so knowing that kids these days have that opportunity and that safe space in school, because they may not have that at home. And they may need to rely on those teachers or friends and resources. So the fact that we have stuff like that today, and I would imagine that some schools may have just other diversity type programs where, just accepting all different people, especially our poor situation with the Muslim community and how much hate they get right now. I like to see alliances like that to help our kids, because, we may not see that future we want to see, but they might. So, yeah.
So this idea of progression, just sort of leads into our next topic, and how it's very relevant to us today. And how do we progress as a society? Or how do we progress as individuals? I think Discovery gives us two strong examples of this through the Klingon civilization and the Federation. From the get-go, we see that Klingons, they're trying to reclaim what they had under Kahless, in a sense, going backwards. They want to stay isolated and protect their own borders. And the Federation, in contrast, is exploring strange new world and building on the diversity of the universe. We can see this in exchange opportunities, sharing worlds, and having multiple species in Starfleet. The idea that diversity makes you strong and moves you forward in intelligence and empathy as a whole. And I can't think about how that relates to my life when I'm looking to make progress. The meaning of progress for me is to move forwards and not backwards, and not be like the Klingons. So I want to ask, has there been a time when you've moved backwards consciously, or wanted to move backwards in order to try and progress? Or overall, how do you view progression? Heather, let's start with you.
So when I was thinking about this, there are two things that I think are relevant. So again, I'll try not to talk for an hour. No, I don't like to go backwards to move forwards. Progression means moving forward. It means moving towards something better, in pretty much every sense of my life. However, I talked in the last episode we did about the fact that I was sexually molested by a teacher in high school for a year and a half. I don't know, more than a year to 2 years. And in order for me to process this, and it's taken, like I said, I'm 36, and this happened when I was like 16, 17. So it's been like 20 years. And it's taken that long for me to mature to the point that I understand what was happening, that it wasn't something that I was doing willingly. Even if I thought it was something that I wanted, it wasn't. So I have to regress. I have to go back and dive into all those thoughts and emotions that I experienced at that time, so that I can progress and move away from it, understand what happened to me and talk about it. So in that sense, I have to go back and I have to revisit all of that to be able to move forward. And with that comes guilt and regret, which we'll talk about down the road. But the other sense with progression and in what I'm experiencing now, and I had talked about the fact that I had just moved into a house like 4 months ago, and my fiance decided all of a sudden to end our relationship. And so now I'm stuck in limbo because I am half owner of a house that has to be sold, or him buy me out, or whatnot. It's really easy for me to sit here and say, I wish I could go back 6 years. Like, I wish I had listened to my intuition. I wish I had paid attention to the red flags. I cannot do that. Like, I can't change the past. Like, going back, you can revisit and you can look at what you've learned from the mistakes you may have made or the experiences that you had. But for me, that's all I'm going to get from the past. Like, you can't change the past. You can only move forward. And so that is what I'm doing. And it's not a great situation. I don't feel very safe in my home. And so I'm taking steps to try to secure a safe place for me. And I have places to go, just so nobody worries. I know talking about this as I have, people are always like, you can come here if you need to get out. And I have not been physically abused, but I have been physically intimidated in the past. And so if that happens again, like, I need to leave. And just for me, I need to know that I'm going to have a home. And so that is just how I progress in my daily life, with getting through something that happened to me 20 years ago and something that's happening to me now. And as it pertains to Star Trek, I think that Discovery is doing a great service. I don't want to just keep talking about the gay characters, but that diversity and, that those characters, that is the tradition of Star Trek. And I feel like, in the past, like I said, Star Trek has pushed the boundaries. Now I feel like they are breaking the glass ceiling. Like, even though we do have other gay characters in other series, and those have been on TV for a while, it's still meaningful to me that a show that I love so dearly is finally doing that. And just having great characters. And so it continues to inspire me and make me a person that is optimistic and wants to progress. And on that note, I'm going to throw this in really quickly. I am incredibly grateful to the Star Trek community and all of the fans and family that I have found, because they are a great part of what's helping me be able to move forward now.
I know. Let's not start crying.
I think I can make it through this one maybe without crying, but I don't know. Personal note, and I don't mind if this stays in the discussion, it's fine. But after a discussion I attempted to have with my former partner the other night, where I, left not feeling safe, I was like, I've got to start like a fundraiser. So, and other people had suggested that I do it and they'd be happy to contribute. But I started a GoFundMe to help cover rent, because I'm going to have to move into an apartment and pay rent and pay my mortgage still. And I make a comfortable living, but I'm not, I'm not wealthy or anything. So it's still paycheck to paycheck type of thing. And the generosity that I have seen in just under 2 days has blown me away, And it has been from Star Trek fans, like from my friends, from my Trek family, from people I don't know, I have never met. I've gotten maybe 1 or 2 donations from my actual biological family. 98% of what I've been so generously given has been from people that know me in the Star Trek community or that follow me on Twitter. And I try really hard to live by the ideals of Star Trek. I have the infinite diversity, infinite combinations tattooed on my back in Vulcan calligraphy. That's something that I live by, as well as being an optimist and treating others the way that I want to be treated and the way that I've seen others treated in Star Trek. So I have someone here at home who tells me that I'm a selfish person and I'm a negative person and I've done nothing for my own personal growth. And I'm just like, you have no idea. Like you don't know me at all if you don't know who I am. And I say this in a humble way, but I feel like I must be doing something right in my life if total strangers like share their generosity to help me get to a safe space. And that's all Star Trek. I mean, I've said before, like, Star Trek has saved my life, and like Star Trek is literally helping save my life right now. So I'll say that before I start crying.
Yeah, because if you start, then I'll start, and this will just go completely off the rails.
Well, Brandi, what about you?
Oh, very rarely have I looked back on my life and wished I could go back to a certain time, because there isn't a lot of happiness in that past. So for the most part, I mean, there will be times, like I said in the previous podcast a couple of weeks ago, that I will become mired in things that happened in the past, whether it was something I did or something someone did to me. And I just can't take that with me to move forward. And we all measure progress differently for ourselves. And some people measure it by having a good job and making a lot of money. And I've never measured myself that way. So people might say, oh, well, you could be doing this or this or this. Yeah, I could, but I don't want to. That's not what I want to do with my life. So go away. But there's always been people telling me, well, this is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And that's going to focus into the regret stuff too. But I've just decided no one gets to tell me what I can and can't do except for me. And, there's certain things that I know I can't do. Like, I cannot be a dancer. I have an inner ear imbalance. And after 3 years of ballet when I was a kid, I was just as bad at the end as I was at the beginning, because you don't train away an inner ear problem. That's not how that works. But, whatever. So, there's that part of me that's like, I wish I could have done that, but it just wasn't physically possible. And so the things that I measure my progress for is, am I more open to change than I used to be? Am I more accepting of the world around me as I go forward? Am I perpetuating that change that I want to see in the world? And so that's how I measure my own personal progress. As far as progress in the world, I think there's kind of a recession going on right now, because there seems to be this whole idea that things were better in the olden times, like things were better in the 50s. You don't know what the 50s were really like. There was so much alcoholism and drug addiction, especially among women in the 50s, because they had to do that just to get through the day, where they were just supposed to be this perfect little person, never talk back, serve your husband all the time. That's not what progress is. And that's not what life was really like. Like, they look at all these 50s television shows and movies, like, that is not representative of what that time was, guys. We don't want to go back there. Why would you want to go back there? And, there are times where I feel like I wish I could go back to that first time I went to Disneyland and re-experience that feeling, but I don't want to live there. I don't want to live in that moment. It's nice to remember that. That's why we have memories. So progression is necessary, and it's so prevalent in Discovery. It's just, and again, it's not like, here it is, we're going to just ram it at you and just open wide, here it comes. It's still done so tactfully, just because it's just the way it should be. This is the way things should be. And that's just how it is. They don't explain it. They don't hang a lantern on it. Nothing. It's just there. And I want to see more progression. There's going to be more progression, I feel. There's going to be more boundaries that they're going to push. I'm ready and open for that. And I continually try to push my own boundaries. I mean, everybody has their comfort zone. And there are good ways to push yourself out of comfort zone, and there are bad ways to do that. So, the only time that I ever feel like I wish I could go back to that moment and do things differently was, with my first fiance who dumped me 6 weeks before our wedding.
Oh.
And what I wish is that I could go back to that moment when he waited until our wedding date was passed, then showed up at my house unannounced and asked for the ring back. Now, what I wish I had done is taken that ring and pawned it or had the diamond reset or whatever. That's what I wish I had done. So that when he came back for that ring, I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have it anymore. You said that you gave that to me and you wanted me to keep it. So that's what I did. And that meant doing with it what I want. So bye, Scott. See you later." But that's obviously not what I did because I was a different person then. However, that experience was the break of becoming who I am now. That was the spot where I can trace everything back to that time because that's when I realized, okay, my life as I know it is actually over because I changed parts of my personality to appeal to this guy, to make him want me, and he still didn't want me. And so now I have nothing. Now I don't know who I am. Now I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I need help. I need help. And so I started going to therapy. And it was the best thing that I could have ever done because there was progress. And I realized, I don't have to be okay immediately. But I also don't have to think that this was all my fault either. That if there was just something I did differently, that I could have kept him. No, he was he was a jerk. You can edit that out. I'm sorry, you can bleep it. But, he was a good little Mormon boy. And guess what? They suck too, sometimes. But in any case, that was the part where I decided, okay, there's no more looking backward. And on my therapist's recommendation, I think it was about 6 months after I started going to therapy, she said, this is a thought. Why don't you take everything that he's ever given you and have a little bonfire? And I did. The thing is that I took our engagement pictures, which I looked really great in, and I just cut him out of them.
There you go.
And so I have all of these pictures that are just me and sort of weirdly shaped, but I looked fabulous in those pictures. And so I did all these things. Now, I'm pretty sure that I shouldn't have been burning without contacting the local fire department.
Probably true.
But, I did it anyway. I went outside and there were clothing items and stuff like that. And I put it all in this pile and I set it on fire and I just sat there and watched it burn. And I smelled the smoke and my eyes started to water because of the smoke and the wind blowing it into my eyes. And I just thought, oh, I am free of this burden of being reminded of this jerk every time I look at these things. And I have never, ever regretted doing that. And I've never had another breakup that was as bad as that, possibly because I was a bit more cautious in people that I was dating. And I sure got a heck of a lot of, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." If I could count. Proportionately, how many times I heard that from guys I was dating, I would say about 70% of the men I dated in my life before I met Dave said that at some point to me.
Yeah, I just got that.
Yeah, and the thing is, they always say things like, "Oh, but I still want to hang out with you and I still want to see you." And, there was a point where it was actually the last guy that I dated before Dave, and he said that, and I said, "No, you don't. We're never going to talk again. You're never going to call me again. We're not going to hang out. So don't act like we are. Just cut me loose, okay? Because I don't need this hope that you're trying to give me. It's not fair and it's mean." And that was it. And then I didn't date anyone for like a year and a half. And then I met Dave. So, cause I was just like done. I was done. It's like, I don't care anymore. I'm not going to put myself out there anymore. And then someone put himself out there for me, and it was a revelation. So, but yeah, progress is just, it's just always thinking, what else do I want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to change? And then I do it.
Oh, what you said earlier really resonated with me about the fact that, like, so like in my situation when this first happened a few weeks ago, I was just like, this is a setback. Like, this is my first house. Like, I've never owned a house before, and I don't have children and don't want children. So like, this was, aside from owning a business for 10 years, pat on my back. Like, this was a big accomplishment for me. And I feel like all of that's being taken away, and I'm taking steps back in life. I've wasted 6 years of my life in a crappy relationship. But today, reflecting on all this generosity from people and feeling like, well, I must be doing something right in life if people are being this kind and generous to me, I was like, this is really just a catalyst for something much better.
Absolutely.
I agree.
It's like, the house situation is difficult, but a house is a house. I am free of what has been an abusive relationship for 6 years, which I just have looked past. I'm a lot like Belle in Beauty and the Beast, where I want to see the good. I want to see the good in everybody. I've yet to find the beast that turns into the prince. But that's just the kind of person I am. I tend to want to help people and heal people. And I knew this, like, getting into this, I was like, nope, I can't be that person. I did it again, whatever. And now, like, I see myself being moved forward with this. Yes, I'm going to lose the house, probably, whether it's sold or whatnot, but that's not a step back. That's just freeing me of a burden. And so now I can move forward, continuing to fully be my strange little self. Because despite what he says about me, which is not true, people like both of you and Twitter, and there's all these wonderful Star Trek people are telling me that what I'm doing is right. And like I said last time, I've never felt more myself than when I am at the Vegas convention, like when I'm with my tribe of Star Trek people. And that is all just propelling me forward. So like you, even though I've had a time in my life now where it's like, oh, this is just a big step backwards, it's really not. And I think that's important when we talk about progression and just the way that we think. And that it's just, again, it's part of that part of me that's an optimist and always trying to find the silver lining in everything else. But I think it's far easier to recognize how you're going to be propelled into the future than to dwell on what's holding you back. So thank you for talking about that, because it resonated.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And I'll tell you this much. The things that he has said about you, I have found that when people say awful, nasty things to someone, those are often things they are guilty of themselves.
Yes.
So if anything, he's projecting, sweetie. It ain't you.
I realize that I do. Because I think I'm a pretty good person. And I think now I've got proof from the people that know me and some people that don't know me at all. And, all of that, whether it's somebody who donated money or it's just a listener that listened to our first podcast and gave us feedback, like that is all my fuel right now, to keep me alive and keep me going. 'Cause I'm not going to lie, like it's a difficult place to be in. One day you've got good news and then you've got really bad news and you don't feel safe in your home. It's up and down. My life is bipolar, but I've got this wonderful lifeboat that's keeping me afloat. And it's just, I'm just so grateful. So grateful. Okay, Amy.
It's your turn. Spill it, girl.
Well, one thing, just going along with what you guys have said, like for me, progression is always moving forward. And there's things that I look at. There's only one time in my life that I would want to go back. And that was when I was at university. And I just loved learning, and I cherished every moment of it. I got my, I started at community college, got my associates, and then moved up to the university. And just the learning, I was so happy. And I think back now, many, many years since I graduated, and I'm like, man, life was so much simpler back then. But would I want to go back? Hell no. Oh my gosh, what I know now. And so what I thought of in preparation for this was like, what makes that point in my life where I want to go back? And that characteristic is what I need to harness to move me forward. And so for me, it was that love of learning. And so when I think about progression in my life, like there's been so many things that I've done that it's like, well, I want to do this just because I want to learn and have this experience. So I went out and I got my concealed weapons permit because I wanted to learn. Number one, I wanted to protect myself being a single female. But I wanted to have that experience and I wanted to learn and progress. I started a business and I helped others get businesses, and I created a checklist and, just all those things to try and help other people start their business. I do books. Well, I used to, but just to have that experience, to buying a house. Like I see that as becoming an adult, And so now, Heather, you have that experience, and whether it's worked out good or bad, but you now have that under your belt where you can take that and move forward. And those things about learning, like for me, that's what helps me to progress in life. And I'm not gonna, well, I am gonna get political. I'm sorry. But the slogan that where we are, make America great again, is so infuriating. And it's so, I do not understand when people say, well, we need to go back to where we were. That's where I lose it a little bit, because no, what you need to do is take those characteristics. What was it that you see was great? And then use that to go forward, because you can't go back.
Yeah.
And everything back then was not good. Everything that you say is good, I'll give you 2 negatives, right? Oh my gosh. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting a little heated. This is the opposite of crying. I'm yelling. I'm going to have to adjust the volume here. So I don't want to be great again. I want to be great in the future, and to recognize and to pinpoint what are those characteristics, what are those things that we did that was good. Take those, not the bad things, take those good things and use them to go forward. Calm down, Miss Nelson.
No, it's okay. Because Make America Great Again, when did we backslide into not great? When did that happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's wait, I can tell you when it happened. Oh, no, I can't. I'm not going to get political. No, I'm not going to do that. But it's just, it kind of makes me feel like, who are the people who are saying this? Do you want us to make America great again by women shutting up about sexual harassment and sexual assault? Do you want to make America great again by suffocating the rights of people of color or people of different gender identities or people who are homosexual or bisexual or whatever? Is that what you mean by making America great again? Because that's what it seems to me right now.
That's what's happening. And yeah, it's been extremely difficult to have watched America fight for gay marriage and gay rights, transgender rights, and women's rights,
equal pay,
human rights, guys, human rights. And this is, I mean, that's the one place where I'll ever be extremely political. Finances, whatever. But when it comes to basic human rights, like by denying gay people the right to get married, like you're just saying they're not human like heterosexual people. And that is just that's not what is ever going to make America great, especially when the rest of the world, I won't say the rest of the world because there are plenty of places where the gay community is murdered for being gay, and I'm glad
Russia.
I don't live there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when it comes down to things like basic human rights and providing for other living beings, that's a difficult place, and that's not the direction that Star Trek wants us to go. So that's certainly something that's difficult to reconcile with progression. And I thought it was interesting that Discovery, used Remain Klingon. It seemed to have been done in a similar fashion. And I think there were articles about that's what it was going to be. And I'm glad that it didn't turn into overtones of that because, despite the fact that Star Trek has always used metaphor to discuss political climates, and that's a fact. Like, don't try to tell me that's not what has happened because it has. Despite that, like, I don't want necessarily to be reminded about what's going on in the world right now when I watch Star Trek. Like, part of me, like, as much as I appreciate that is just what Star Trek does, I also want that escapism. And I think that's part of why people are struggling with Discovery is because it's a little darker than what we're used to. And I just herald that to being that, in Discovery, we're getting to where we're going. We're not in the 24th century yet. We're on our way. And so Discovery has conflict and the set is darker, whatever. But I'm glad that there weren't like super obvious overtones of the political climate in Discovery. Because I just want Star Trek. I don't know. It's tough. It's a struggle, and politics are something very difficult to talk about right now. And I think that at the end of the day, you just eventually have to agree to disagree. I don't know.
I agree. I totally agree with that. And I have said that on many occasions. I'm like, look, you can feel the way that you feel, and I can feel the way that I feel, and we're not going to change each other's minds, but that doesn't mean we can't coexist.
Right.
Because we can't.
And that's where it kind of harkens back to, IDIC and what IDIC preaches. And again, the emphasis on the fact that, IDIC does not include the right to hate speech. And that's been debated with me on social media over and over and over again. If that was part of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, Captain Kirk wouldn't have kicked someone off his bridge for being a bigot. It's just we've moved past that in Star Trek, therefore it doesn't apply. So in the very least, if you don't agree with someone, at least show them like basic human decency and respect and move on, because being a hateful person is not a person that you really want to be. I don't think that's a legacy anyone wants to leave behind. So if anything, like, just accept it for what it is. And if you can't have a conversation with someone, don't have a conversation. Just agree to move on and move on. I think it's important to try to facilitate discussion with people who are different from you and believe differently. I think that helps us learn from one another and teaches us compassion and empathy. But again, like, I draw the line where it's fueled by hate.
Well, these themes sort of just run in together and meld and bleed into each other, with this progression and, accepting diversity, but also progressing and going back sort of leads us to guilt and regret. This top theme was actually suggested by a listener, so thank you. And I think it is very fitting for Discovery. I think by the end of the 9 episodes, we can all agree that Captain Lorca is showing signs of guilt and regret. And even though we don't know him too much, we learned that, his last ship and crew was lost under his command. And it may have been a logical decision. We're not quite sure on the fine details, but it's very evident that he's living with what some may call guilt and regret. So I wanted to talk to you and have you tell us, is there times in your lives that you have felt guilt and regret? And let's start with Heather.
Okay, so I'm reading this really great book that I recommend. It's The Ultimate Star Trek and Philosophy, The Search for Socrates. It's a collection of stories from all different authors, and it's been on my bookshelf for a year. Being single means lots of reading time. But they're talking in here about guilt and shame. And so I'm going to read this quick little passage in A Theory of Justice by John Rawls. He distinguishes between shame and guilt. Essentially, we feel shame when we violate a private code of ethics, and we feel guilt when we violate a public code of ethics. Shame is thus self-regarding, whereas guilt is other-regarding. At the same time, the virtue of integrity sustains one's adherence to the private code, while the virtue of honor does the same for the public code. And then they talk about chain of command and all kinds of interesting stuff. So get the book. But I thought that was really interesting because it applies to exactly what we're talking about. And I think one of the biggest struggles I've had personally has been with coming to terms with the sexual abuse that I suffered in high school, because people need to understand that despite the fact that I was 16 or 17, I thought I knew what I was doing. And I didn't. I understand why I assumed I was consenting to it and how that all worked. I carry a lot of shame because of it, and because I say I let that happen to me, and that's not right either. Like this is me still working through this. I didn't let it happen to me. It just happened to me. The regret and the guilt that I have is the fact that there had been rumors about this person before it happened. And then when it was found out, it was not publicized in order to protect me and secure my school relationship, that I graduated and everything. So no one was ever told. The person was told to stay away from me, and that was it. And maybe a year after I graduated and everything, it was in the past, a girlfriend had told me that person tried to kiss her or kissed her. And so I think at that time I just put it out of my mind because I couldn't deal with all of that. And now as an adult, I wish that I had spoken up then, or that my parents, and I mean, bless my parents, I know they were doing what they thought was best for me. But it didn't protect anyone else. And so there's a lot of personal shame for me and a lot of guilt because it happened to other people. And I don't know to what extent. When I heard this from a friend, I didn't inquire to the extent that it happened or anything. But I don't doubt that he continued to molest other students. And so I feel a lot of guilt and regret. And part of me is like, well, why don't I just come out and do it now? And I'm like, there's a lot on my plate right now. So I don't know at what point, if I'll ever be comfortable to name names and open that box, because I don't know that he's still teaching or what. But knowing that I could have said something and that probably would have stopped anyone else from being hurt is a difficult thing for someone like me who doesn't like others being hurt at all. So that's really where I carry that. And I think that in Discovery, like a lot of the characters are dealing with guilt. I think that Burnham, of course, has this huge burden of Captain Georgiou's death. Not to mention, other people that have died since she's been there. Like, we don't really see her talking about other deaths on the ship. Like, it's not her fault that Landry died. Like, Landry made a mistake, but I kind of wonder, like, how much when she's alone, like in her thoughts, like she thinks about her actions and how her actions set off a chain reaction. And if she harbors guilt for other things, I know that Saru probably has a lot of guilt and regret for what happened to Georgiou. I bet he like probably thinks he could have tried harder to save her. He could have done something to prevent Burnham from doing what she did.
Well, I think you're right with Michael, because when she's on the transport coming over to Discovery, and the other prisoners or whatever are giving her a hard time about, 1,000 people have died. And then she says the number exactly of deaths that have happened because of her. So I think it's evident that she carries that guilt quite heavily.
I guess I can't imagine somewhat like having such a heavy burden. Having a burden of death is very different from what happened to me. But I think of all the things in my life, there's really nothing that I regret as much as not being vocal about that then. And I think it's a big part of why I'm vocal about it now. I don't know that there are any high school students and being abused by their teachers that are listening and are like, I can get myself out of this. It's partly a healing process for me, and partly just to put it out there that, it's wrong. And the way that I thought about my experience was wrong. Like I was still a minor. I was still a kid. I was still forming ideas about sex and love and acceptance. And maybe someone has a child in high school that's acting weird and shutting themselves off from everybody. I don't know. But I talk about it now because I can, and it's taken a long time to do that. But I will always regret the fact that I know of at least one other person who he, did something to. So yes, let's move on.
Well, I just want to say that, protecting you was the right thing to do. Protecting him was not the right thing to do. Yeah. And I wish there could be a way to accomplish both, of protecting you and outing him. It's a hard decision. And the way, even looking back, God, it's part of me is still like, how much do I say about things? But my parents had him over to the house and confronted him with me sitting on the couch. And that's, the equivalent of bringing Yeoman Rand into the office after, bad Kirk assaulted her with the good Kirk and having the good Kirk, it's just, you don't do that. And that's actually happened again in my life where I was harassed by a supervisor, a male boss, and complained about it to a female manager, and then got sucked into a room with the male boss that harassed me and another male boss. And welcome to the life of women. Again, I can't, I understand my parents did what they thought, was in my best interest. And so I can't harbor negative feelings towards them for doing that. But it definitely could have been handled better. And the horrific thing is that there was a similar incident at another school with the
teacher that was close to the teacher that hurt me. So it was happening other places, and that did get publicized. And maybe seeing that my parents decided not to put me through that. I don't know, but
I don't have any burdens quite so heavy as that. I do have a burden of, well, it's kind of a burden of a death. Because in the last episode that we did together, I talked about my grandmother and how she used guilt to manipulate all of us. And she also caused a lot of regret because there were, being the person I am now, I wish I had just stood up to her and said, no. But that's not what you do when you're a child. You don't know that. You don't understand that. But when she was in a nursing home and I would go and visit her, I would try to visit her regularly, and sometimes I just couldn't face. Damn it, I'm going to do this again. Sometimes I just couldn't face going in there. And it wasn't just because, it was difficult for me to see her like that, but it was also seeing all of these other people that had basically just been forgotten and abandoned. And it literally was a weight on me. I felt so heavy when I was there because I couldn't help these people. I couldn't even help my own grandmother. And so there was a night that I was supposed to go visit her, and I was just so tired. I was so tired. And usually when I wasn't going to make it there, I would call her, and I would call the front desk. They'd connect me to her room, and I'd talk to her for a bit and let her know I just couldn't come that day. And I didn't do that. And then later on that night, we got a call that she had died. And I felt so much guilt over that for so many years. It's like she was just probably laying there just waiting. When is she going to come? When is she going to come? And then now she's dead. And, honestly, I was in a community theater production of Les Miserables. And there's the scene when Eponine dies. If you've seen Les Miserables, you know what I'm talking about. And everybody was always amazed. It's like, you cry every time. We've done this 24 times. How do you cry every time? I think of that night. And I think of the guilt that I feel because of my insane ability to empathize, that sometimes I wish I could just turn off for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, how would I feel? She was laying there and she was thinking, why hasn't she come? Why hasn't she called me or anything? And yeah, I know that I can't go back and change that, but it still upsets me to this day. It doesn't hold me back, but it still upsets me from time to time. But it was really great when I was doing Les Miserables, because man, I could turn on the tears like that. And everybody I never told anybody how I did it. I'm just like, I would just say, oh, I'm just really an emotional person. Like, nope, that's guilt and regret, baby. Guilt and regret. So it's just, that's another moment where I wish I could have gone back and just made a phone call. How hard would that have been? But at the same time, it was also the fact that, it was just going to be another visit of her guilt tripping me about something. So there was that aspect of it. I didn't want to face the manipulation and the guilt from that, which is why I didn't make the call.
Yeah. And I don't think that, of course you're, just because I say I don't think you should feel regret or guilt, it's not going to change anything.
No.
It's, I'm the same INFJ, and that's why I'm stuck in relationships that are abusive and terrible for me. I just want to keep loving and empathizing and being kind and compassionate and keeping that person, Brandi. Like it's a wonderful thing to be that person. And
I know that it's necessary because there are so few of us who are this extreme in our empathy.
And it's a challenge, and it's a challenge when it affects us negatively. And I so often wish I could be that person that just stops caring.
Even for a minute. It just never stops. It never stops.
Yeah.
Ever.
But I had a friend that said it the other day, and I was just like, no, like, don't. I live with that person right now who turned it off, who cares nothing for me, despite what he has thrown my life into. There is no compassion, no empathy. That's an ugly person. That's a person I don't want to spend a moment more with. And that's not ever a person that I want to be. That empathy and compassion makes you a beautiful person in a beautiful light. We're the kind of people that I think want to reach in and pull the light out from others that are hurting. Like, we want to get that light and pull it out so that they can get away from that darkness. And what I have kind of come to the conclusion today actually was that instead of being that person, I'm just going to keep being the light and just be a really strong light, and you will bring those people to you, and they may not be ready to see that light or be a part of that light, but eventually they will. And you, my dear, are a very bright light.
Oh, stop.
As is Miss Amy.
We're all bright lights. Every single one of us. Not
Well,
that I
my
have snot
heart
bubbles
is
going on.
beating a million miles a minute because if you look on the outline, listeners, this is Amy and it's blank.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. I have debated going back and forth on what to share about guilt and regret. Part of it is because, like, thankfully, I do pretty good at managing guilt and regret. And so I don't really feel too guilty or have many regrets, albeit there is one. In part because I feel like that idea of progression, that it's like you've experienced it, you learn from it, and then you move on. And so even like my marriage and divorce, like I've never regretted that. I've always been grateful for that because it's made me who I am. And so things like that, I just sort of feel like that's part of me. That's my life. That's my experiences. And that's who I am today because of it. And when I think about what I have regret over and the hesitancy that I feel sharing it is because if I say it out loud, I look absolutely stupid.
No.
And
No.
I don't like being stupid. Anyone who knows me, I love being right. It's a flaw of mine, I know. But when I think about an experience that I had, and if I say it out loud, I have only told my mother about it. And because if I put it to words, I'm a stupid fool. And I don't like having that out there. So I do have much regret over that. And it's one of those experiences I definitely have learned from. But I wish that I wouldn't have made that stupid mistake. That's the one thing that I would just not wish. Or wait, the one thing that I do wish that I wouldn't have that experience. And I'm stupid for it.
Stop.
No, you're not stupid. You may have done what you term a stupid thing, but that doesn't make you stupid. You're obviously not stupid. I think any listener to this show, regular or otherwise, would argue to death that you are not stupid. And saying that you are is unfair. Mm-hmm. Don't be unfair to yourself. We have all done stupid things. That doesn't make us stupid people.
I built
It just makes us people. It just makes us people. It just makes us people. People are not perfect. We are flawed. We make mistakes. We're human. It doesn't make you stupid, and it never will. Never.
Well, until then, that's my guilt and regret story. that still affects me. I mean, and this happened 8 years ago, and I still don't feel comfortable telling people about it.
Yeah.
It stays with me. It does. And I don't know why I can't get over it. Maybe it's because I'm not talking about it, that, every other stupid thing that I've done, like getting married, but thankfully I was smart enough to get a divorce. Oh, and I wanted to say, Brandi, when you were talking about it, like my pictures, that's only me. Thankfully, a wedding day, it's all about the bride. So any of us together, nope, threw them away. I think I actually did burn them.
Good.
And so I have a couple, just me in my wedding dress, but the rest, gone.
Yeah.
So
My first marriage, like
that.
Mine are in an album somewhere, and I just never look at it.
Burn it.
See, I'm too nice. I was having a discussion because my marriage was an 8-year marriage, 9-year relationship. And then this was a 6-year relationship and like 2-3 year engagement. My ex-husband, I feel like at the end of the day, despite what he did to me, was still a good person. And so because of that, like, I don't go back and look at the pictures. I don't talk to him. But for me, like that was my wedding. That might be the only wedding I'll ever have. And so that's just a part of my life that I just packed away in that box. And that's where it's going to be. Amy, I have also done a really stupid thing, which I will not talk about. Very few people know it. It was a really stupid thing, and I paid a consequence for it, and it will be with me for the rest of my life. And yep,
it's
like,
hard.
I get it. Like I've had enough things happen in my life that I know sometimes I'm just a stupid person. I'm kind of dumb sometimes. That comes from being incredibly trusting, oddly enough, despite what's happened in my life, and gullible, very gullible. I don't get the joke half the time. I think you're telling me fact and it's a joke. Haha. So I've come to just accept that, yep, okay, made a mistake and it doesn't define me, and move on, because I cannot change that one. But it's tough. Like, I think a lot of us have our demons, and that's the one thing that nope, not going to talk about in a podcast ever.
You don't have to talk about it in a podcast, but our demons only have the power that we give them. And I feel that if you talk to somebody that you haven't talked to before and unburden yourself, you'll find that that demon has no place to hide. If you bring it out into the light, it's going to shrivel up and die. But I'm not saying, go and say it on a podcast. I'm really not. I'm just saying from personal experience that, dragging that demon out into the open is the best way to destroy it.
Yeah. I've talked to a few people and told them, and for me, I just have to detach the emotion that's attached to that, to just accept it for what it is, and I made a stupid mistake.
Yeah, and everybody makes stupid mistakes.
Everybody does. Nobody's perfect, and there's worse I could have done.
Sure.
Yeah.
And nothing that I've ever done in my life, frankly, adds up to the things that have been done to me. So that's just, I try to find ways to have peace with it. But yeah, otherwise I will talk about pretty much everything in my life, but not about that one thing.
And that's okay. You don't have to. Please don't tell it in public if you don't want to. But.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like when we do these podcasts, and kind of what I said last time about it's important to talk, and I love these discussions. it's something that I've done in my work over at Tricorder Transmissions. I've just started talking about my life and putting it out there, and I've been met with nothing but acceptance and support, and that's helped me really learn to love myself and to come to terms with things that have happened. So as much as like I encourage listeners to do that, but when you're ready, because not everybody has a safe space or a safe person. Or just the emotional energy, the mental energy to tackle that stuff. So in time, I hope that people will, and I hope that our discussions here have helped give people a little courage or inspiration, because it feels good. Like I think I said on Twitter, I am having a difficult time getting motivated to podcast right now. When Discovery comes back on, I'm looking forward to talking about Discovery on Disco Trek. But Shore Leave, which is my convention podcast, I just don't really have it in me to talk about conventions right now. I've turned down 3 other podcasts maybe, because I just don't have it in me. But this one, like, I look forward to. Part of it is your company and that you're both women. And especially because of the response from the first one we did, that really helped. And it helps to sit down and talk. We should have the Amy, Brandi, Heather therapy hour.
Yes, let's do that. This is your Counselor Troy hour. We'll call it the Counselor Troy hour.
Yes.
I know you would like that, Amy, and I would too.
Counselors in the house. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree. And I think I put it on Twitter, like, this is like my mental health goodness, that it's, and I love getting into these topics, and they are difficult, and you do a lot of self-examining, but that's where we grow, and that's where we can learn to be more diverse and to get over our guilt and to progress further in our empathy and understanding of others.
That self-awareness is like a prime characteristic of a Starfleet captain. I was reading the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard. Highly recommended. It's so good, guys. I think it's better than the Kirk one. But
that's because Picard is better. But that's just me.
No, I'm also partial to Picard. But they were just talking about the characteristics of Starfleet captains. And I was like, check. I could be a captain someday. Self-awareness and the ability to self-reflect and grow from what you learn. Man, that's a commendable trait and ability. And not everyone has that. Not everyone gets to that point in their life. So the fact that we're able to do that together and hopefully, I think we've gotten feedback from listeners who have said they've kind of turned around and done the same. I commend everyone for that ability, because that will take you far. And maybe someday you will have you do have a ship of your own. Your life is your ship. You're the captain of your own ship. So, but maybe you'll be an admiral or whatnot. I don't know. I'm waxing poetic now.
Brandi, what are your final thoughts?
I even told my mother today, I don't think I'm going to cry on this one. And what did I do? I should know better. Because I'm just a very emotional person. And we already know that from the episode 2 weeks ago. So nobody probably but me is surprised. And really deep down, I wasn't surprised. I just thought, no, I can do this without crying. Till we got to guilt and regret. Star Trek has changed my life. And I think we can all say that, or otherwise we wouldn't be here. And it's continued to change my life throughout my life. And, I didn't know it was changing my life when I was a child because I was a child. But as an adult and as I've matured, I see how these things along the way have affected me in a positive way. And even if it's something that has come across as something negative or difficult, it has made me re-examine myself and see why I feel that way and what I can do about it. So the diversity of the community is just as diverse as the Star Trek universe. And because it's a reflection, I think, of what we can be, of what our best selves can be. And that gives me hope for the human race when 20 years of retail crushed it. And believe me, retail will crush your soul and make you lose all faith in humans. All faith. So, and just in this year alone, becoming a part of Trek FM has, again, changed my life and changed it for the better and put me in contact with all of these people like you two and like Bruce that I do Live from the Edge with, and other things that are coming about that I can't talk about yet. And just, it's again enriched my life. And my husband even said, I think you finally found your home. 'Cause we're all searching for that place where we're fully accepted for who we are. And my husband said, yeah, I think you're there. I think you're there. And I said, I think I am too. And then there's still that part of me that's cautious because I've been burned a lot of times with things like this. Groups that I thought I would fit in well with and then find out, oh no, you don't really like me as I am. Okay, bye. But yeah, it's been really nice to immerse myself fully in this wonderful community because it brings us all together. Yeah, we might quibble about things and nitpicks about things, but when it comes down to the bare bones, again, we're all the same. We're all the same under our skin, and we all love Star Trek and really what matters beyond that.
Well, it is time to close. And
what? We don't get your final thoughts, Amy? Come on, don't you think?
I sort of combined them with Heather's.
It's hard to follow that up, Brandi. Yeah, that was a good note. Star Trek people are the best people, and Star Trek saves lives.
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
And the themes are relevant and important.
Yes.
I mean, just looking at the themes that we've discussed, I just am so inspired by these themes that the writers put in. And I guess, I read this quote and I'm totally paraphrasing that it's like, whatever you take out, whether the writers intended it or not, that's what you needed to take. And so I can give credit to the writers or I don't have to, but what I'm taking out from Discovery is important and relevant. And I hope that listeners, these themes come out as are more. I mean, this is not an all-inclusive list. Like there's more themes out there, I'm sure. And so to self-evaluate and to identify with what you're seeing in Discovery is for us, and I think I speak for all of us, is what Star Trek is about. And just so glad to have it back on TV again.
I think it's really interesting too that we all really see ourselves in Michael Burnham. And we are 3 different women, and she is a woman different from us, and yet we all really see ourselves there and see ourselves in Discovery. And I'm seeing that with just a lot of different people, finding themselves in these characters in the story. So here.
Yay.
All right. Well, it has been fun talking about more themes in Discovery today, but it isn't the only thing we've been discussing on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, the 602 Club.
Oh, huge. Tintin, definitely in Europe and in many, many other countries, in Africa and Asia, is really, honestly, as big as James Bond rolled together with Indiana Jones and Superman.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
First of all, it very much hinges on the existence of subspace. which is also a kind of murky sci-fi term that is used in Star Trek to explain how warp drive works and how you can communicate.
The orb.
And so it makes the relationship between Nog and Jake really important because I think it does really soften Sisko's heart towards the Ferengi. And I think it does the same thing for Rom. Rom, I think, begins to see the ways in which these Federation types actually are different than most Ferengi to kind of think of them.
Warp 5.
I like to talk about these things. They're not easy to talk about. This is not an easy discussion to have because of so much stuff that's going on in our society right now. And what's been going on for years. Again, that hashtag, the Me Too, it really opened my eyes, and which is what it was supposed to do, right? It's exactly what it was supposed to do.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
And check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. And you'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're an Apple user, which a lot of people are, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people get up in arms about this. We've got you covered. You can find our shows on Apple Podcasts. Hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. On iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, desktop iTunes. Get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And please, pretty please, leave us a star rating and written review because that makes us more visible to other potential listeners and share the good word. So if you're not an Apple user, we got you, boo. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
Well, we would love to hear your thoughts on today's show. As we mentioned, it was so good to hear your comments and feedback. And there's many ways for you to do that. Best place is in the Babel Conference, and that's our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it will come right up. Now, if you'd like to send us an email, we really appreciate those as well. You can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and then select the edge that will come right to us. And you can also find us on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Brandi, where can people find you on the network?
Well, you can find me guest hosting on The Edge from time to time while Discovery is in its winter hiatus. And when Discovery is running, you can find me on Live from The Edge, which airs live every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And basically the day after Discovery airs, you'll find Bruce Gibson with me, and we're going to talk about it. And we often have a guest host as well for that to make it an interesting and balanced conversation. And you also find me always lurking around the Babel Conference. I'm always poking my head in there and dropping in comments here and there.
And on Twitter?
And on Twitter. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Brandi112 on Twitter, which is BRANDIWINE 12 because I spell my name with an I. Actually, I didn't get that choice. My parents gave me that choice. So let's make it complicated. But you know what? I don't care how people spell my name because it all sounds the same. And then also I have my podcast with my husband called the Dark Corner Podcast, and where I swear a lot.
Okay. So remember last time I totally just got Heather's Twitter? I just got yours. Brandi Wine? Are you kidding me? That's awesome. Why am I so slow at these Twitter handles? Oh my gosh. I totally just got that. And how long have I been podcasting with you?
No,
oh my gosh, that's
seriously.
So you don't really see the handle too. It's like you see the person's name.
Oh, that's
whatever.
so funny. Oh,
which is currently Brandi Jackola la la la. So
there you go.
I wanted to do something holiday. But yeah, no, it's honestly, the first time I saw Alien, which was done by Brandywine Productions, I got so freaking excited I could hardly stand it. So, yeah, I thought, when I grow up and computers are a big thing, I'm going to have that as my username. No, I didn't think that, actually. I had no idea what was coming. But that's my go-to thing, is Brandywine.
Awesome. And Heather, where can people find you? Tell us about what you're doing.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So the easiest place is Twitter. I'm LLA Posper. I am a host on the Tricorder Transmissions Network, which is the tricordertransmissionsnetwork.com. My shows are Shore Leave, which is about conventions, and Disco Trek, which is a Discovery After Party podcast. The network is Tricorder Show on Twitter. Shore Leave is Shore Leave on Twitter, and Disco Trek is disco_trek. And then I am one of the administrators of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. That is where you'll find me if you ever plan to make your way to the convention in Vegas, or you just want a safe place to come be on the internet. Come join us there. And then I pop around on Trek FM and sometimes peek into the Babel conference. So I'm all over the place. Amy, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me here on the network. I host Earl Grey, which is our podcast dedicated to the next generation, my favorite. And I do that with Justin and Richard, and we have a great time there. And I'm on hiatus right now, as is Discovery. But when it comes back on, I do a little thing called Postcards from the Edge. So fans, you can give me your comments, and then I read them on air, and that drops on Thursdays once we get started back again in January. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. Nothing to get there. It's Miss Amy Nelson. Well, the Miss is because I'm a teacher. So there you have it.
That's what I thought, because you're Miss Amy Nelson.
Yeah, that's because you're a little quicker and smarter than me on these Twitter handles.
No, stop it. No.
I'm telling you. I know. So funny.
No.
But my favorite place is on the Babel Conference. I love interacting with everyone, and it makes my heart happy. I think we have a good group there on the Babel Conference. So
I agree. And if you all would like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all of the details. And perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, you gotta love that, producer credits, and more. And that's available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. You guys, we have a lot of shows here. A lot. And it cannot be inexpensive. And we really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you will join the team. So again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
And talking about those producer credits, we have some amazing associate producers we would like to thank. They are Norman Lau, Tony Robinson, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Michael Rutledge. Thank you so much for supporting The Edge and Trek FM. Well, Brandi, Heather, we've got another one under the belt. I truly thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and having these open and honest conversations about themes in Star Trek and specifically Discovery.
Hope we do it again.
Yes, I feel like we should really try to maybe make this a regular thing and do it from time to time, because obviously we enjoy it, and so far the listeners have too.
Yeah.
So
give us your feedback. Let us know. I'm sure we can come up with stuff to talk about.
Oh,
I'll tell you my whole life story, guys.
Oh my gosh, you guys totally surprised me by saying that. Listeners, I did not pay them to say this.
No, she didn't say. No, we're genuinely excited and happy to do this, and would love to do it more.
Yep.
It's a special thing.
It is. And I, again, thank you so much. Well, you can, listeners, join us next week for another episode of The Edge, because my wine is empty.